of Riverwood Poetry Series, I welcome you and thank you for attending tonight's event. Before we begin our program, I'd like to say just a few words about Riverwood for those of you who may not be familiar with our program. Riverwood is a long-standing poetry reading series. Over the past couple of years, we've been privileged to call Real Artways in Hartford, Connecticut, our home. Our mission is to bring poetry to the greater Hartford community, and we've developed a wonderful audience there. And we've had the great fortune to bring poets of national repute as well as local poets to our reading series. In addition to the featured poet, we welcome local poets to come and share their work at our open mic. I'd love to give a shout out to our Hartford audience and to those open micers. We miss you. I don't have to tell you that we're living in strange times. While we miss gathering in person, we're grateful to be able to connect with you, well, this way. And once again, we're indebted to Real Artways for providing the technical support to run this webinar. Ian from Real Artways is with us tonight, sitting in the director's chair. So thank you, Ian and Real Artways. Upcoming on Tuesday, November 10th, Riverwood Poetry Series will present poet Sean Frederick Forbes. And on Tuesday, December 8th, the poet Rhonda Ward. These readings will again be by Zoom, but we'll have an opportunity to our open mic readers to join us that evening. So please check back for additional information and please like us on Facebook. Riverwood has historically had as its focus social justice, and of course that theme plays a large role in tonight's event. My friend and poet extraordinaire, Elaine Zimmerman, will moderate tonight's program. There will be a Q&A following the reading. You can use the Q&A feature on your Zoom to submit questions. We'll hold them until the readings are completed. Since I don't have to tell you where the bathrooms are located, and I can't pass the donation jar, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Elaine Zimmerman.
Thank you, Julia. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Tonight, we are really marching against hatred through art. And we have 11 readers who will be speaking against hate by picking a poem from this beautiful anthology, Take a Stand, Art Against Hate. Each reader has selected a poem and we'll both read the poem, but also speak to it. And the commentary will be, frankly, as important as the poem itself. We are here to stand up against hatred, to stand up against racism, and we do it as artists, we do it as leaders, and we do it with you. We know that there's approximately 100 people now listening, and we anticipate more. This will be taped, but we want to build against hatred in as many ways and with as strong a heart as we can together. The readers here represent all of New England. So we have readers from multiple states. We are a mix of artists, community leaders, teachers, tribal leaders, elected officials. We span the gamut in our range of interest areas, but we do not span the gamut in our commitment to fight hatred. And so thus we are here together this evening with you. We will honor the poets who succeeded in getting into this anthology and make sure that as we read the piece that you will know who the author is. We will share that. You will, anyone who wishes to access the text can. There's a wonderful legacy in this anthology. It begins with legacy, how we began. It goes to we are here. Essentially, do not deny any of us. We are here. It goes to then why. Why is this occurring? It then goes to evidence, examples of why and what we are experiencing. And then it goes to resistance. Interestingly, all the readers picked pieces that were in the why section, the evidence section, and the resistance section. I took the liberty to stagger them. So we're going to go back and forth between why, evidence, and resistance. James Baldwin said, I imagine one of the reasons that people cling to their hate so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, that they will be forced to deal with pain. Tonight, we are going to address that pain because so many of the readers have experienced it themselves. And it's my honor to introduce Mike Keogh, who will be our first reader. Mike is an award-winning photographer, family photographer, and he is the founder of IAMNOTAVIRUS. No small thing to have founded this as an organizer, which has just taken flame across the country. He's a masterful organizer. He's also an extremely successful artist, and he's really working to effectively address the immediate rise in hate crimes and violence against Asians and Asian Americans around the globe. He also aims to use storytelling, and that's a particular jewel of a gift that he has, to help heal and to help people across culture heal across the globe. Mike.
Thank you, Elaine. So my name is Mike Keogh. I'll be reading Why Whales Are Back in New York City by poet Rajiv Mahabir. After a century, humpbacks migrated again to Queens. They left due to storage and white froth, baking the shores from polychlorinated biphenyl, dumping into the Hudson, and winnowing Manhattan schools. But now grace dark bodies of song return. Go to the seaside, hold your breath. Submerged of black flukes silhouetted against the Manhattan skyline. Now ice beats down doors on Liberty Avenue. To the port, I sit alone on orange, train seats, mouth sparkling from sins. No matter how white supremacy gathers at the sidewalks, flows down the streets, we still beat our drums wild. Watch their false god statues prostrate to black and brown hands. They won't keep us out, though they send us back. Our songs will pierce the dark fathoms. Behold the miracle. What was once lost now leaps before you. So I chose the poem. I had the privilege of speaking with Rajiv earlier last week, who shared with me that he was writing this on the subway. And during this time, this was in 2016, there were Indian Caribbeans from Queens that were being deported. So he was seeing his community, he was seeing businesses close down in his community. He was seeing families torn apart. And so he decided to write this poem. And what struck me about this poem was it resonated with me as a Cambodian American whose community does face deportation. My wife is Hmong. Hmong and Laotians face deportations now as well. And for us, when we see the news, we internalize it. We don't have the privilege to look away, to say it doesn't affect us. It affects our mental health. And what I loved about this poem was the magic in Rajiv's work and his words. This idea of creating something larger than ourselves and outlasting, this violence that we face. People are deported, but our community still survives and subsists. And I just thought that was really empowering. Thank you for inviting me to read this poem. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. That was beautiful. Thank you very much. It's my honor to introduce Marilyn Nelson, who really does not need any introduction. She's a 3-time finalist for the National Book Award. She's one of America's most celebrated poets. She's a professor emerita of English at the University of Connecticut, and she held the office of Poet Laureate in Connecticut for 5 years. She's the author, translator of more than 20 books of poetry and prose for adults and children. In 2014, she published a memoir which was named one of NPR's best books of 2014, entitled How I Discovered Poetry. Marilyn.
Thank you. I am going to read a poem by Ilya Kaminsky. The poem is called In a Time of Peace. And I often feel when I go to poetry readings that hearing a poem once, I never hear the entire poem, because when I hear an interesting word or phrase, I start thinking about it. And I miss the next 2 or 3 lines. So I'm going to read Ilya's poem and talk about it briefly and then read it again. Again, it's by Ilya Kaminsky, In a Time of Peace. Inhabitant of Earth for 40-something years, I once found myself in a peaceful country. I watch neighbors open their phones to watch a cop demanding a man's driver's license. When a man reaches for his wallet, the cop shoots into the car window, shoots. It is a peaceful country. We pocket our phones and go to the dentist, to pick up the kids from school, to buy shampoo and basil. Ours is a country in which a boy shot by police lies on the pavement for hours. We see in his open mouth the nakedness of the whole nation. We watch others watch. The body of a boy lies on the pavement exactly like the body of a boy. It is a peaceful country, and it clips our citizens' bodies effortlessly, the way the president's wife trims her toenails. All of us still have to do the hard work of dentist appointments, of remembering to make a summer salad, basil, tomatoes. It is a joy, tomatoes. Add a little salt. This is a time of peace. I do not hear gunshots, but watch birds splash over the backyards of the suburbs. How bright is the sky as the avenue spins on its axis. How bright is the sky? Forgive me. How bright. I admired this poem for many reasons, starting with the title, which becomes a refrain repeated in the poem, In a Time of Peace, or later it becomes, it is a peaceful country. It is a peaceful country. This is a time of peace. The irony of that phrase contrasted with what is being described in the poem and what we're experiencing now that Ilya is talking about is, I think, very, very powerful. I also love the fact that he's 40-something years old, and for the first time, apparently, he's finding himself in a peaceful country. But of course, it's not a peaceful country. It's the same as every other year of his life. I love the way the pronouns change in this poem, from being personal pronoun, I and me, to being a pronoun of the group, the nation, we and our. And he moves back and forth between those things, because I think what he's saying is that we belong together. We are part of one thing. Even though we are individuals, we are also a group, and we have to accept our group identity. The wonderful images of the body of this murdered boy, this boy shot by police, whose body lies on the pavement for hours, whose open mouth exhibits the nakedness of the whole nation, but whose body finally is nothing more than the body of a boy, something as simple and poignant that it can be turned into a symbol of inhumanity, but finally it's something as simple as the body of a boy. And I think that's all I want to say about it, because the poem, I think, speaks very clearly for itself. The irony of the suburban life that's being described, I'm sorry, that's being described as a contrast to the pain and oppression that the poem is describing, is, I think, very moving and very powerful. And in some ways, the poem reminds me of the famous painting by Bruegel of the fall of Icarus, in which you see the boy with wings falling from the sky in the distance over the sea. And meanwhile, life is going on in the foreground of the painting. I think there's something of that in this poem too. At the same time, Ilya Kaminsky describes this boy's death. He also sets that death against the ironically phrased hard work that we are doing, the hard work of dentist's appointment, the hard work of making a salad, the hard work of living our own private lives while somebody else is being shot. I'll read the poem again. In a time of peace. Inhabitant of earth for 40-something years, I once found myself in a peaceful country. I watch neighbors open their phones to watch a cop demanding a man's driver's license. When a man reaches for his wallet, the cop shoots into the car window, shoots. It is a peaceful country. We pocket our phones and go to the dentist, to pick up the kids from school, to buy shampoo and basil. Ours is a country in which a boy shot by police lies on the pavement for hours. We see in his open mouth the nakedness of the whole nation. We watch others watch. The body of a boy lies on the pavement exactly like the body of a boy. It is a peaceful country, and it clips our citizens' bodies effortlessly, the way the president's wife trims her toenails. All of us still have to do the hard work of dentist appointments, of remembering to make a summer salad, basil, tomatoes. It is a joy, tomatoes. Add a little salt. This is a time of peace. I do not hear gunshots, but watch birds splash over the backyards of the suburbs. How bright is the sky as the avenue spins on its axis. How bright is the sky? Forgive me. How bright. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. I'd like to introduce Stephen Hernandez, who is an extraordinary policy leader and organizer for the state of Connecticut. He's the executive director of the Commission on Women, Children, Seniors, Equity, and Opportunity. And in that context, he works exclusively for the underserved and underrepresented. Stephen, welcome and thank you for reading.
Thank you, Elaine. It's an honor to be here among all of you. The piece that I chose is named Matthew Shepard by Rob Jacques. I'm not a martyr. I did not die for a cause. My problems were my problems, not yours. All I ever wanted was a little bit of pleasure, so save your applause for those who died deliberately and for good measure, bravely in the name of God, country, or human pride. Given a choice, I would have rather have lived. I love music, good company, and cute guys. I was not ashamed of what I was, nor did I hesitate to make the first move, to smile, to start light conversation, or touch a thigh that seemed slightly willing to be touched. No meant no, and I'd move away. Yes meant for a while, somewhere secluded. There'd be pleasuring, a little wrestling, bodily fluids exchanged between friends, perhaps, just perhaps, a bit of happiness in longer contact on which life depends. In short, I wanted what you want. Don't kid yourself. You could have hung as easily and as much in pain as I on that rural road. Someone cute pretends to like you, offers comfort, a pause from the routine mode of living by way of a few moments of bliss. Well, I was unlucky, as you might have been. I may have lost my life for a promised kiss, but I was as normal and human as you are. That alone gives my murder a tragic ring. Remember this, when you search for love, gay and straight amount to the same thing. This piece was a very personal piece for me. I was just a few years older than Matthew when he was murdered. And I was recently moved to the District of Columbia, where I was experiencing in my youth the freedom and liberation of being out of the closet for the first time among peers, for the first time among employers, among colleagues, among people that I respected and who respected me. And to see the life of a young man with so much promise, with so much possibility, extinguished in a way that was filled with rage and hatred and vitriol in about as normal a little town and as normal a place, a state in the state of, in the United States, it just reminded me the reason that so many of us stay in the closet for so long. And it reminded me of the reason that the closet, however isolated, can be so comforting because of how incredibly fearful hate and vitriol can be. I think about how it is that all of this works in cycles, and how, as we look around today and we see some of that hate and vitriol return to the public eye and almost re-ingrain itself into the public psyche, I think about all those little kids who are wondering why they're different, who are wondering whether they are in danger, who are deciding quite deliberately to stay firmly, quietly, and securely in those very, very lonely closets. For me, Matthew Shepard was a hero, despite what the poem says, because he bravely stood out of that closet and it got him killed. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I'd like to introduce Pastor Bennett, who is a man of faith, a profound change agent, a leader in our state and in the country. He's a pastor, a preacher, a teacher, an organizer. He serves as the co-chair of Congregations Organized for a New Connecticut, which is a multi-issue, broad-based organization across counties. He's ministered and served in pulpits and universities throughout Connecticut, as well as around the country. And he has served as the guest chaplain for the United States Congress House of Representatives in 2009. Pastor Bennett.
If I can jump in for just 1 second, we've had a request from an audience member that if the poets could state what page the poem is on, for those who have the books, they would like to read along.
Okay, thank you. Anthony.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anthony Bennett, and I am glad to be here. I'll be reading from page 190. Page 190 and 191, let's go to the video. It is by Chris Espenshade, and it reads as follows. In a most interesting turn this week, the same entitled white people who immediately and automatically defended god-awful snap decisions by armed policemen have been calling for a more careful review of the incident between a young white man in a MAGA hat and a tribal elder. Suddenly, when a white male is accused, it is time to slow down, to take a breath, and carefully review the situation to see if there is anything to lessen the egregiousness of his actions. As they say on NFL broadcasts, let's go to the video. Here is the scene. Young white man from Catholic high school, young black man from public school number 103. Action. Smirks in face of Native American elder. Action. Runs in fear of police. Name? Nick Sandman. Name changes every week. Ruling in the field. Saving smug racists. Ruling in the field, a threat to police. Immediate response? Much of America condemns actions. Defenders of white folks everywhere call for a careful review. Parents of the young man hire public relations firm to rewrite the narrative. The immediate response, officer shoots victim 16 times. White folks defend officer due to difficulty in policing. Police reflexively defend all police actions. Video review reveals other people were also acting bad. Young man did not say anything overly racist, but wore a hat in support of our racist president. Video review reveals there was no real threat to police or public. Shooting is proven unwarranted. Officer is found guilty of a reduced charge and given a short sentence. Video review reveals people jumping to his defense prove his white entitlement is a valid reason for his smugness. Evidence suggests racist intent. And so after the video review, ruling on the field stands. Young white man is still smug. Young white man goes back to school. After the video, ruling on the field is overturned. Young black man is still dead. Young black man stays in the ground. Why this poem? Because I live, I parent, I partner, I pastor. I will probably breathe my last breath going to the video. Amen.
Thank you, Anthony. Our next reader is Liz Neptune. Liz is joining us tonight from Maine. She is the president of a consulting service, Neptune Advantage, where she provides technical assistance to Native American tribes and nonprofit organizations across the country. For more than 13 years, she was the director of Health and Human Services for the Passamaquoddy tribe as at Indian Township. In that role, she managed the health systems and the delivery of health care for the Indian Township community. She is an extraordinary leader, a spiritual gift to the country, highly regarded for her words and for her vision. I'm honored that she's joined us tonight. She spends a significant portion of her time illuminating the inequities facing Native Americans and dispelling negative stereotypes. And she carries hope that advocacy and education will lead to changes that can improve the well-being of Native people across the country. Liz, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Elaine, for inviting me to participate tonight. I've selected a poem that can be found on page 310, and it's titled, When the Patriarchy Crumbles, Instructions for Men, by T. Clear. Look both ways before stepping out of your car in the parking garage. Look both ways when you return. Check that the pepper spray is still in your pocket. Line up the trigger. Clutch your keys like a weapon with the tips extended between the fingers of your fist. Did you remember to lock the car? Check your back seat. Lock it now as soon as you get in. Look both ways when you step onto the sidewalk. Look behind you. Look over your shoulder. Be wary of the shrubs, parked cars, cars that slow down, unlit corners. Avoid alleys. Listen for footsteps. Walk with a purpose. Walk with power. Walk like you're 17 again and can outrun everyone in your class. Even when you're old and haven't run for years, walk like you can. Don't forget any of this. Don't become lax. Don't ever think you're immune. Don't question what you've been taught. Don't think you're the only one that's ever done this, because women have done this forever, to stay safe, to remain alive. It will become as routine as brushing your teeth, so automatic you won't even think of the keys jutting from your fist like daggers. I selected this reading as a mother of 4 daughters and of one two-spirit transgendered person. These are the conversations that we've had more than once around our kitchen table, around in our living room as we gather together. The fact that we are Indigenous or American Indian puts us at higher risk for violence. American Indian women and girls are being taken away from us in an alarming high rate. In 2016, there were over 5,000 incidents of missing and murdered Native American women in this country. Our women are murdered at a rate that's 10 times higher than any other ethnicity. And sadly, the majority of those murders are committed by non-Native people within our own lands. 84% of American Indian women have experienced violence in their lifetime. We're at least 2 times more likely to be raped. With all of this, I have had to teach my children to always be on guard, that because of their heritage, that they must never forget and they must never be lax. And I think that it's also important, especially given the state of the US today, that we all have to be on guard, especially if we're people of color. We all have to pay attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. It's now my honor to introduce Taylor Turner and her father, Robert. Taylor and Robert are together, so I'm delighted that we have a family tonight picking a poem together, reading the poem and responding. And so the way it's going to work is that Taylor's going to read the poem, and her dad, Robert, who is an entrepreneur, an artist, and a surely loving dad, is going to give the response. Taylor is a leader in New England in mental health and substance use. She works on policy to affect behavioral health reforms focused on prevention, intervention, recovery initiatives. Before this, she worked for years at HUD, and she has been a housing activist. She's worked for 20 years in public policy and social change. We're really honored that Taylor went to the hospital today to set up stage with her dad, because he in the moment is healing at the hospital, but he wanted to be the respondent. So we're just so grateful and so glad to have this family. So first we'll hear from Taylor, who's going to read the poem, and then Robert, you'll comment.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We are pleased to join you on this evening of love and resilience. Together, we chose Every Child is a Legend by Janine Hall Gailey, and this poem can be found on page 155. 155. The morning after a shooting, I watch a cold mist rise in the February air. I am saying the names of dead children out loud. Every child killed is a legend unwritten. Their voices in the air like the shrill whir of hummingbirds, their footsteps on the frosty grass like the silent hooves of deer. How beautiful their faces look to me. I have no children, so I can't feel like those parents who wake today with one less being at breakfast. The crows fly overhead. The news likes to show the shaking survivors' tears. Thoughts and prayers can't even make a dent into this river of shades, every story untold, their voices silenced. I was taught to shoot a gun at 7, arrows at 8. A little soldier armed. Each bullet rang clear through the empty and innocent air, then the paper target. 7. 17. These numbers add up to what? I was never the shooter or the victim, merely a writer of poems. What new story can change these children, lead them to a new ending? Their hearts stop with a bang, louder than a jet engine in my ears. An imagined dragon growls, hungry, overhead, smelling brimstone in the distance. Thank you.
Thanks, Taylor. So, Robert, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your response.
Oh, look, I see the poem as a woman who happens to be born white, and in the vein of trying to understand the newness of her situation. She's looked at things from a young age as being born into shoot. She looks at shooting targets and just as looking at targets. And shooting guns at a young age, did not equate that to the violence of the black situation. So in her growing up, she's becoming new, and she's very interested in looking into the facts of not having a child but feeling the pain, and equating that to something that she never felt before. So she's looking to be her newness is a new awakening. So she's trying to honestly be of the knowing of being how does it feel to be black, not equating it to the life that she lived. She lived a privileged life in a white society, but she's always tried to figure out why did she not understand the plight of blackness. So she's starting from the beginning in pure honesty of a new beginning and a new awareness of how it should be. She's honestly trying to overcome what she didn't know. And she's really on herself for not knowing, not understanding what it is that she took for granted. She's becoming new, and she's aware of her understandings of, the plight of black women, not even though she hasn't been that in this position. She haven't had a baby, but she has the pain. And she hasn't had been shot, but shooting the arrows into targets, she never equated to be human beings. Shooting the bullets into targets, she equated that to target practice. But then she sees a new awareness of looking at black people being shot and really being unaware of the pain that they felt, because as she equated when she was young, she figured it was just paper. But black people are alive, and the women are in pain, and they're trying to find, in her seeking, she's trying to find out just where she belongs and why does she know that of the black plight. So she's really honestly trying to be aware, and she's an innocent bystander, and she equates the pain of, like I said, the pain of of people that's been shot, people that's been women that have had kids, and she hasn't had a kid, so she's trying to equate the pain that she feels to that. It's a new beginning for her. I see this as evolution and a newness of a violent try to overcome what she never knew. So she really is feeling guilty about unknowing. She's trying to become a better person. And that is my look at that. It's to look at it from another view, as somebody is just aware, becoming aware of honesty and of knowledge of not knowing, and trying to become a new person and understanding, the plight of Black people. And actually feels guilty, and that she didn't know before. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Taylor. Really appreciate your joining us as a family and your words. Thank you very much. We're now going to hear from the Attorney General for Connecticut, William Tong. Thank you so much for joining us. Really good to see you. William Tong is the 25th Attorney General to serve Connecticut. The office was established in 1897. He took the office in January of 2019 and is the first Asian American elected at the statewide level in Connecticut. Before his election as Attorney General, William Tong served for 12 years in the Connecticut General Assembly. He was in the legislature and helped lead several major laws, including the Second Chance Act, Domestic Violence Restraining Order Act, Lost and Stolen Firearms Act, the Act Protecting Homeowners' Rights, and the Act Protecting School Children. Attorney General, we're really glad you've joined us tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Elaine, and thank you all for your readings and your reactions. They've been powerful and affecting. I only regret that I have to follow all of you. But I'm reading The Wall by Anita Andreesi at page 260. Build a wall of saguaros, butterflies and bones of those who perished in the desert. A wall of worn shoes, dry water bottles, poinsettias, constructed of gilded or crazy house mirrors so some can see their true faces. Build a wall of revolving doors or revolutionary abuelas. Make it as high as the sun, strong as tequila. Boulders of sugar skulls, adobe or ghosts. A Lego wall or bubble wrap. A wall of hands holding hands, hair braided from one woman to another, one country to another. A wall made of Berlin, a wall made for tunneling, a beautiful wall of taco trucks, a wall of silent stars and migratory songs. This wall of solar panels and holy light, panels of compressed Cheetos, topped not by barbed wire, but sprouting avocado seeds, those Aztec testicles. A wall to keep us in and them out. It will have faces and heartbeats. Dreams will be terrorists. The wall will divide towns, homes, mountains, the sky that airplanes fly through with their potential illegals. Our wallets will be on life support to pay for it. Let it be built of guacamole so we can have a bigly block party. Mortar it with, I'm not going to pronounce this right, Huacatl chocolate. Build it from coyote howls and wild horses drumming across the plains of Texas, from the memories of hummingbird warriors and healers. Stack it as thick as blood, which has mingled for centuries, la vida. Dig the foundation deep. Create a 2,000-mile altar lit with votive candles for those who have crossed over defending freedom under spangled stars, and drape it with rebozos and sweet grass. Make it from two-way windows. The wind will interrogate us, the rivers will judge us, for they know how to separate and divide to become whole. Pink Floyd will inaugurate it. Ex-Presidente Fox will give it the middle finger salute. Wile E. Coyote will run headlong into it and survive long after history forgets us. Bees will find sand-scoured holes and fill it with honey. Heroin will cover it in blood. But it will be a beautiful wall, a huge wall. Remember to put a rose-strewn doorway in Nogales where my grandmother crossed over, pistols on her hips. Make it a gallery of graffiti art, a refuge for tumbleweeds, a border of stories we already know by heart. So I chose this poem because to me, it reads like an anthem. So many stories, so many images. One of the very first things I did as Attorney General was to sue the President of the United States over the building of the border wall. So that was a legal and political fight. This puts faces and images and texture and richness to that fight and purpose. Let me just read a couple of quick sentences and just give you my reaction to them and why I chose this piece. You know, Anita talks about a wall to keep us in and them out. I visited the border at San Diego and I saw firsthand the wall in action, how we keep us in and them out. So that was vivid to me. Also, let it be built of guacamole so we can have a bigly block party. I could easily have rewritten that for myself and said, let it be built of pork fried rice so that we can have a bigly block party. Mm-hmm. And what that means to me is the recognition that all of us immigrants and sons and daughters of immigrants are woven into the fabric of this country. You can't exercise us. You can't have a block party, especially a bigly one, without us. And the one image that deeply affected me from that day at the border was watching Mexicans cross over a land, an elevated land bridge from Tijuana. And they weren't streaming through the fence or jumping the wall. They were going to work, because we need them to cross over every day to power our economy, especially in San Diego. A couple more thoughts. Wile E. Coyote will run headlong into it and survive long after history forgets us. It's a reminder that we keep running into that wall in ways real and figurative. And when George Floyd was killed, I reminded people not to think of this as an isolated moment. There was so much talk about this is a moment, this is an inflection point, this is an opportunity. And I wanted people to remember that George Floyd at that point was the latest name in a long line of people whose lives have been taken unjustly at the hands of law enforcement. And of course, he was followed since his death by others who suffered the same fate. And let us remember that this has been going on. This isn't just a moment. We've had moments before. We've had opportunities to confront these challenges and tragedies before, and we have failed. And the final thing I'll say is, she ends with, make it a gallery of graffiti art, a refuge for tumbleweeds, a border of stories we already know by heart. A border of stories we already know by heart. We know George Floyd's story. Mm-hmm. We didn't have to hear it. Nobody had to tell it to us. We knew a story because we saw a story in Ferguson and Staten Island, Baton Rouge. And as an Asian Pacific American, people often say to me, Mr. Attorney General, I can't believe where we are in this country right now. I can't believe the hatred. I can't believe that we separate children from their families at the border. And I say, why not? I can believe it because we've done it before. We separated African children from their parents. We separated families at the border when they came off of slave ships. I can believe it because we did that when we interned 125,000 American citizens in camps on American soil, Japanese Americans, barely 75 years ago. And so I just remind everybody, we know these stories already by heart. We can tell these stories ourselves. And I will close by saying, all of these, and thank you, Stephen, all of these speak to us personally. And it reminds me of who I am. I'm not the Attorney General when I wake up in the morning. When I wake up in the morning, I'm the son of 2 immigrants, one of whom was undocumented. And when the president says he wants to denaturalize American citizens, he's talking about my parents. And when he says, and others who are allied with him, criticize, ridicule, anchor babies, the immigrant children born on American soil to immigrant parents, he's talking about me and so many of us. And so that's why I chose this piece, and I encourage all of us to find the personal stories that we already know by heart in all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Really grateful that you are joining us this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Next speaker is Frederick-Douglass Knowles II. He's the poet laureate in Hartford. His collection, Black Rose City, was featured at the Association of Writers and Writing Programs in 2018. His works have been featured in many journals, many chapbooks of sorts, many key poetry books. I'm just going to name a few. One is A Road to Peace, which is a collective tribute to Dr. King that was published by Yale University. Fingernails Across the Chalkboard, Poetry and Prose on HIV, AIDS from the Black Diaspora by Third World Press. His poem, Mason Freeman Cuts Jenkins Down, was nominated for a Pushcart Prize. For those of you who don't know, I mean, that is the penultimate in poetry, to be nominated for a Pushcart. His sonnet, Sunday School in the 90s, The Way I Understood It, won the 2019 Nutmeg Poetry Award. He's an associate professor of English at Three Rivers Community College. Frederick-Douglass, welcome. We look forward to your reading.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the other readers who have read before me. I was experiencing some difficulties and so forth, but I got it all worked out. I'm here and I'm very thankful. I'm just going to get right to it. So the poem that I selected from this anthology is Bullet Points by Jericho Brown. His collection of work, The Tradition, recently won the Pulitzer Prize in Poetry this year. And as I read that collection, this piece just really stood out for me. And then when I received the anthology for this event and I was going through and looking and I saw it and I was just like, yes. And I emailed real quick, like, I want this poem. So this is Bullet Points by Jericho Brown. I will not shoot myself in the head, and I will not shoot myself in the back, and I will not hang myself with a trash bag. And if I do, I promise you, I will not do it in a police car while handcuffed or in the jail cell of a town I only know the name of because I have to drive through it to get home. Yes, I may be at risk, but I promise you, I trust the maggots who live beneath the floorboards of my house to do what they must to any carcass than I trust an officer of the law of the land to shut my eyes like a man of God might, or to cover me with a sheet so clean my mother could have used it to tuck me in. When I kill me, I will do it the same way most Americans do. I promise you, cigarette smoke, or a piece of meat on which I choke, or so broke I freeze in one of these winters we keep calling worse. I promise, if you hear of me dead anywhere near a cop, then that cop killed me. He took me from us and left my body, which is, no matter what we've been taught, greater than the settlement a city can pay a mother to stop crying, and more beautiful than the new bullet fished from the folds of my brain.
Yeah, really.
The magnitude of this poem, the rawness, the intensity, the tone, the energy. And not only that, but I selected this poem because of the logic. It's a paradox, right? It's the logic and the illogic, right? So it's the logic of this poem. Like, I will not shoot myself in the head, right? Or I will not hang myself. And I'm not gonna do this while I'm handcuffed in the back of a car, right? And so, as Attorney Tong was referencing, and the brother and Taylor were referencing as well too, is that these stories of what's happening to people, to human beings, whatever label you want to put on them, American, Black American, blah 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 blah, to human beings, and the audacity of a system that tries to feed us this illogic and insults not only our intelligence, but insults, like our responsibility of being human. So to tell me that someone hung themselves, or they died in a cell mysteriously and nobody knows what happened, and there was no foul play and nobody touched them and so forth, and where there is clear evidence that's being concealed, hidden, protected behind a blue shield and so forth, it's very disturbing, right? And this is not and I chose this poem because it's not an attack on law enforcement. It's not an attack on I'll just say law enforcement. It's about accountability, and it's the lack of accountability. That's what we are frustrated about in this particular sense of young unarmed Black men being killed and being murdered, right? It's not about that. We're not going to be able to fully eradicate a human behavior from the face of Earth. It doesn't happen like that, right? Their behavioral traits. So some people are going to have them, some aren't, right? So it's not about eradicating the behavior. Hopefully, in a utopia world we could, but it's about the accountability, so that when these behaviors are committed, there's accountability. If I commit one of these behaviors on the streets and so forth, right, I am going to be held accountable by a system that is based off of constitutional principles, right, and constitutional rhetoric. I'm going to be held accountable. And so thus for anybody else, especially municipality that is supposed to uphold these constitutional principles and so forth, violate them, right? If anybody knows better, it is them. And so it is the lack of accountability that brings the frustration. Now, you can hear it in my voice. And when people are watching what's unfurling over our country and some of the travesties that are happening and so forth, and the acts of you know, just, oh, wow. Just the acts, period. And we say to ourselves, people say, well, how come they're doing that? And how come they're burning things down and this and that and so forth? Well, how come we are continuing to just allow the falsities to continue and so forth, right? And so, you know, the brother that spoke about, you know, honesty, right? And being a better person and so forth, right? And so let's hold that across the board. We all have responsibilities. You know, I'm not a law enforcement officer, so I don't know what they go through on a daily basis. Don't get me wrong, right? And I know it can be challenging and so forth. They're human beings, but come on. When you see, come on. And then as Attorney Tong had said, you know, across the country, more and more examples. And then so that energy continues to build, and there's not enough accountability. And so that is what drives us. And you know, I really appreciate Jericho Brown, and I'll wrap up. I appreciate Jericho Brown for this particular poem, you know, and the title, Bullet Points, you know, and the reference to his you know, his mother, like, so clean, my mother, you know, of God might, or to cover me with a sheet so clean, my mother could have used it to tuck me in, you know, and then that imagery of a mother seeing their child underneath the white sheet, it's just a lot. So, you know, thank you for allowing me to be part of this reading. It's phenomenal and so forth. And I really, truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frederick-Douglass. Really appreciate your joining us and reading that exceptional poem, and also your commentary. Thank you so much. I'd like to introduce State Representative Mary Jane Wallner. As I said earlier, and for those joining sort of midpoint, this is a New England reading against hatred. So we are representing not one state, but a myriad of states. And I'm really honored that a state representative who's in her 18th term, that means the public really likes her, 18th term in the New Hampshire House. She is a leader for children and families in New Hampshire. She's known for her fiscal wisdom. She's a really good math person and has led on finance in the state of New Hampshire. It's my honor to have her as a leader also nationally with the National Conference of State Legislators, joining us and representing her state. Mary Jane.
Thank you, Elaine. It's very, very nice to be here this evening. I'm going to be reading a poem that is on page 300. And the author of the poem is Gail Tremblay. And as I read, I was surprised as I was reading Gail's information in the book that Gail and I actually went to the University of New Hampshire together. I don't know that she remembers me or I remember her, but we were there together. And so I even felt closer to the poem after I knew that it was someone I had been on campus with many years ago. The name of the poem is Strategies for Outlasting Trumplandia. Lately, each day, I wake to a world where the sun seems to rise over the eastern edge of this whirling planet that for millennia has made life possible. And I find things in chaos. I watch beautiful beings becoming extinct, forests burning, hurricanes destroying cities and islands, water polluted by chemicals, oil, and pesticides, polar ice melting, and coastal water consumed by the sea. All while a man who, like me, is 73 and old enough to know better, makes policies to harm the earth, and the circle of things that supports life. So he and his friends can become richer by stripping the land of resources he should never use if we are to sustain life for our grandchildren. The older that I get, the harder it becomes to understand greed, the lack of grace, the insatiable desire to devour that makes life bearable. I long to join with humans who every day thank plants for transforming the carbon dioxide we exhale and the light of the sun into the air we inhale and the food we eat. How living among a million natural miracles can any of us forget the delicate balancing act required to protect the systems that made survival possible? Each one of us need to remember to give back to Earth more than we take, needs to whisper into the ear of our mysterious universe and work ceaselessly to transform everyone's consciousness, so we can celebrate together the shift to a new way of living. In harmony with the spinning orb, we ride for thousands of miles in a great spiral path through the vastness of a space that even in our dreams, we have barely become to know. So I was drawn to the poem because of my concern for the world we're going to be leaving our children and our grandchildren. As Elaine said, I am a lawmaker, but for the past 50 years, I was a child care provider. And I'm seeing children grow up in an environment where I see more children ill, more children have asthma. Recently in New Hampshire, there's been a cancer cluster discovered on our seacoast where children are being poisoned by PFAS in our water. It's very concerning what's happening to our environment and what's going to happen to our next generation. My own two grandchildren are living in California in a town that's been ravaged by fires. Their family's been on alert many times for evacuation. Several times in the last 2 months, they've had to ready themselves to leave their town because there have been fires are so close to where they live. And recently, my daughter sent me what I found to be a very jarring photograph. It was a photograph of the two children, one's 4 and the other's 6 weeks old. And they were in the house, and she was showing me the picture because she had all the windows and the doors taped so that the smoke wouldn't get into the house and affect the children. So my concern is for all children, of course, and for my own grandchildren who are living in an environment that is very dangerous. Our country has had for the past 4 years a man in the White House who does not believe climate change is real. He has endangered our environment because of greed. And we must have leaders who believe in science and protect our environment. For me, the poem is a poem calling for action. We must elect leaders who respect the earth. We must respect the environment and give back to the earth more than we take. The poem calls for advocacy to save our planet. And thank you for inviting me to read.
Thank you so much for that, Mary Jane. I really appreciate your joining us.
Thank you for asking me.
I'm gonna close this section and then we'll open it up to questions and any answers that you might want to give. With the poem that I wrote that is in this anthology on page 215, This is a poem that I wrote to my friend Nelba Marquez Green, whose daughter was murdered in Newtown. Her daughter, Anna, was in kindergarten. I'm wearing Anna's name band in honor of her tonight. So this is called Echo of Stone. The daughter is winging wildly against the white orchards, braided hair, braided dusk. The hills shift and fold in ebbing light. A blue line ribbons through memory. The mother sobs, nothing but shattered urns. Her daughter shot, gone. Where did we forget our wholeness? Wanting the holes in her daughter's fabric to grow roots of purpose. Hair, limb, vine. Open the skin, we sleep in dust. Tear the pulp, nothing is changed. Repeat the end, an echo of stone. Please hold the roof down, guard the light. Fold arms around each child and what shoots forth from clay. Do not ignore our small and vast despair. A whisper of wings as close to us as breathing. Each lamb returns slowly down the path the shepherd counts with rod of ash. Through a dark window, the mother stares, twirls her son's curls. The night, a long knife, sharp as what pierces through dirt, air, sound, breath. I wrote this poem. I was with Nelba, and she had put a lot of energy into mental health reform because the shooter in Newtown clearly suffered from mental health issues and did not get all the interventions that might have helped him not murder so many children, including his mother as well, including the school principal and teachers and substitutes. And I was with Nelba when she learned that the state budget didn't actually put the money into mental health that she had thought was going in after this massacre. And I watched her sobbing and sobbing. And it really was this question of when we bury people before they should be gone, what is the legacy and what can come up from the earth that we can learn? And can we learn? And do we learn? And is there a way to heal? And she is a deep woman of hope and love and is leading for love and against hatred, which was part of why I selected to put this poem in this book, because it's really against all the violence that buries us and what will help us rebound and come up from earth, resisting and fighting oppression with life, which is, I think, what everybody has chosen to do who has joined this reading tonight in various ways and with different stories. I think that sometimes from loss, nothing emerges, truly nothing. And it was this moment that I was with her when that feeling occurred that I wrote this. But sometimes there is vision and sometimes there is hope. And I think it is that fight for life against all that kills that keeps us all together and is why we are here tonight reading and sort of putting art up and words up against hatred. and in honor of that, and in honor of the love that is possible if we fight hatred in all its forms. I want to thank all the readers and everybody attending, and would open it up now for any questions. Julia has been sort of curating the comments and questions, and we'll take some of them now.
So we have a couple of questions. One, I'll let Elaine decide who she wants to address the question to, but the panel is asked to respond to Lawrence Ferlinghetti, who said, "We have to raise the consciousness. The only way poets can change the world is to raise the consciousness of the general populace." So,
why don't I just leave that open? Is there anybody who would like to respond to that?
Yeah, I guess I'll respond to it.
Okay, Frederick-Douglass.
You know, it's not only, yes, you know, it's poet's responsibility to raise the consciousness, but it's not solely the poet's responsibility to raise the consciousness, right? I mean, it's the responsibility, one of the responsibilities is of artistry, period. You know, if we look through and we study human history and human culture, right, it's the artists who detail, you know, in great significance of what their culture looked like or resonated or represented, right? And so, yes, it's the poets from a literary perspective, right? There's other literary genres as well too, but it's artists, visual, you know, musical artists and so forth, performing arts. Like art is, if you want to know about a culture, you know, you study the art. And, you know, just one example how important that is during World War II, you know, when Hitler was, you know, blitzkrieging across Europe and so forth, one of the first things he was doing, he was going straight after the artwork. He was going after the art, right? One, because of monetary value, but two, because it was recording, right, you know, history, in this case, Jewish history, the rich history and so forth. So it is our responsibility, and a lot of us are fulfilling that responsibility, but it is the responsibility of artistry as well, first and foremost.
Thank you. We'll take another question, Julia.
So this next question came after Marilyn Nelson's reading of Ilya Kaminsky's poem. The comment is that it's a very moving poem, but it raised in this person's mind the question how white people can come to see the wounds with empathy, the loss of a boy, a life. How can we find our eyes to see our hearts? So I think in general, we're asking through that question, basically, how can white people best respond to the racial violence?
Marilyn, I think you're on mute. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I'm very pleased to have read with this group this evening. Let me start with that. It was a very moving reading. And how do we learn empathy? We learn empathy by entering into lives of other people. And I think I want to go back and reiterate what Frederick-Douglass Knowles said, that this is what art does. Art allows us to enter other people's life experiences. And I have been very much interested in the growth of, for example, children's books that describe experiences of children beyond, who is it? Dick and Jane. I grew up with Dick and Jane. That's pretty much all that was around when I was a child. That's what children's books were. And I've been very interested in seeing the growth of a new world of children's book publishing in which we see the lives of children of color. But I'm very much bothered by the fact that these books are almost invariably marketed for children of color. The marketing is always, here is someone who looks like you. You're supposed to be reading books about people who look like you. And I think that's wrong. I think this new world of, I'm sorry, I write children's books, among other things, and it really bothers me when I go, for example, there is an annual African American children's book fair every year in Philadelphia. It's huge and wonderful. And one of the things that has frustrated me, aggravated me every time I've gone there is the fact that the audience of families come to this fair. I would say 95% of them are African American. That's who comes to the fair. And if there are one or two white people there, they come up and buy a book and say, I'm buying this to share with my class. I teach in a predominantly Black school. Mm-hmm. And what I would like to see is from the age of 2, children reading or being read stories about children who don't look like them, stories about children who don't share their experiences, so that the inner eye of their heart can be opened to discover their empathy. And again, Frederick said that this is what art does. We need to have all kinds of art put in front of us. And I think that needs to start early in our lives.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Julia, any other questions?
There is another question, 2 more. And this one is interesting. What's the effect of cell phone videos and social media? Does the proliferation of cell phone evidence lead to greater justice or greater numbness?
Well, I mean, I'll address it, but I don't want to like maximize, you know, answering the questions. If someone else would like to address the question, please feel free.
Go for it.
I don't think it does either, actually. I think at this point in time, you know, we're in a paradigm shift in our society. And I think it actually maintains the connection. You know, I mean, we're doing this right now as a result of COVID-19, a global pandemic and so forth. And so we have been halted from social interaction, but the social interaction within us has not been halted, right? We, as human beings, it's a human need for love and belongingness and so forth, right? And so like any medium or any substance, as we know, too much overabundance is unhealthy, it can lead to an addiction and so forth, right? So it's a matter of, I'm a Libra, so it's a matter of balance. And so I don't think it's leading to numbness. I think it's all about the person who's actually, you know, utilizing the medium and so forth, and what their intent is and what they're looking for. If they're looking to be numbed, as some people do, right? Then they'll keep going until they become numb. But I think it's a connection that just we are using at this particular time to help us remind us that we're human.
Thank you, Frederick-Douglass. Anybody else want to respond to that? I would just say from my perspective, it's just not flat. I mean, you know, to Frederick-Douglass's point, it can be abused, but it can also connect all of us. And we have seen around the world that in certain countries, when information was kept from people, it actually was technology that allowed for revolution. So it really depends on time and place and use. And like anything, it can be abused. Taylor, did you want to say something?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the advent of, you know, when people in school started, you were writing letters. Then next thing you know, you're texting. And you have all these it gets away from human nature. You don't feel the person. You don't write love letters. You know, you don't write to him. You don't mail anything. You know, it's gotten to the point where everything is so abstract. Like driving a car. You're in your own world. It's just like, you know, you're not really relating. It's like text and don't feel. You know, anybody could text. And then you have all these new apps that really doesn't allow you to know the person. You can say anything you want and lose your identity. I mean, the conversation of people not gathering together already, not talking to each other anymore, is dead. I mean, how could you have a society and the people not can't speak to each other? They can't speak to each other. They speak through bits and apps. So I mean, when we were younger, you wrote letters, you wrote words. You got to each other, you spoke to each other. Now that's all gone. So to me, the media and all these adaptations takes away from the human experience. I don't know how it could ever get back to it. Technology is ruined. It has really ruined human nature. It's taken us so far. We all live in our little bubbles. We never socialize. We never talk to each other. You know, you text each other. So I believe it's really harmful to deep human nature to be like that. I don't know what could be done, but it's too late.
Thank you, Robert. So that's a view that's showing the little crumbs side of technology. Thank you for that, Mike and Marilyn. Mike.
So, you know, with social media right now, a lot of these videos that come out, there are people that aren't surprised by this. You know, it's heartbreaking to watch. I think what it showed was that we were all asked to isolate for so long and be in our, be by ourselves and social distance. And, you know, so a lot of us were making bread, we were baking, we were finding new hobbies. When everything started reopening, you know, we had what happened to Ahmaud Arbery, we had what happened to George Floyd. And that really I felt that shook our consciousness, because we were in this other place where when we thought reopening was going to happen, we were going to be able to see our loved ones, you know. But what we saw, we saw violence against Black and brown bodies, against Asian bodies. And so I think with these videos that we're seeing, I don't know if it leads to more justice, because, you know, these videos, we've seen them before. We know how the story ends, like, you know, Attorney General Tong said earlier, you know. And yeah.
Thank you for that. Marilyn.
I'm not sure I remember the question clearly enough to really address it, but I think what the intention was to ask what the effect of video recordings of injustice are. And I think they're making a tremendous difference. That it's one thing to hear somebody say, I was called out of my name in the grocery store again. And the difference between hearing that and seeing a video of, it's like was it the first lady of, what state is it, who's from Brazil and left without her Secret Service people just to pick up something in the grocery store the other day, and who was accosted and called names. And I mean, that's something you could hear and think, oh, big deal, you know, something happened. But when you actually see it, when there's a video showing you what's happened, you can't deny it. And that's something that I think brings viewers into the experience in ways that they would not be entering ordinarily. I was just telling somebody recently about a virtual reality experience I was invited to have a couple of years ago. A virtual reality experience that was created by an African-American sociologist. I think she's a sociologist, to teach people about racism. And you put on this helmet and there you are. You look at your hands wearing this helmet and you have the hands of an African-American boy who's about 14 years old. And you're in his apartment. He's just come home from school and he wants to go out to play basketball with some friends, and he changes his clothes and puts on a black hoodie, and his mother says, you're not going to wear that, are you? And you have control of it, and you put on this hoodie and you go out and you are this 14-year-old African-American kid. This woman who created this experience created it so that people, everybody of any background, can enter that experience and be there and understand how, if you look like this, and again, you're looking at your hands, you're seeing who you are, you're a different person. It's an extremely powerful experience. And I think that recordings, I mean, remember the recording that went viral of the kids who were high school kids, I think, or middle school kids who were invited to a pool party somewhere, and the cops busted this. They were invited to this pool party, and the cops were grabbing these kids and throwing them on the ground and treating them as if they were criminals. Seeing that makes it a visceral experience, much more than just hearing high school kids got accosted by the cops. There you are, you're seeing it, and it's infinitely more shocking. So I would say that that this is an advance in the availability of experiences that can build empathy.
Yeah, thank you. Stephen?
I think about the video as evidence, and hearkening back to Pastor Bennett's selection about narrative.
Yeah.
And how the evidence is woven into an established or dominant narrative. And I think about the narratives that are competing now when we look at these videos, the narrative of a young man that was going nowhere, that was getting himself into trouble, and that ended up probably where he was expected to end up. The narrative of a young boy who was just going out for a snack. And the thing is that when we see the evidence, We are so ready to weave that evidence into the narrative that we are most comfortable with. And the beautiful role of the poet is to disrupt that narrative and to make our comfortable narratives uncomfortable, so that we ask, what am I weaving this evidence into? Is it true? Or should I disrupt it? Should I undo it and rewrite it in honor of that lost life?
Thank you. It's why so many people selected Poems of Resistance tonight, and evidence. It is precisely that disruption. Thank you. Julia, any other questions?
Yes. Can I speak?
Oh,
sure.
yeah, go for it.
Oh, I misunderstood the question. I thought the question was about social media. I didn't know it was about video. You know, so that's why I made a comment on social. I was commenting on social media.
Listen, we'll take your comment any day, Robert, about writing letters, and that was beautiful. So they don't contradict each other.
Okay.
Julia, anything else?
Yeah, I think I can probably roll a couple of these questions together. We're being asked, how can poetry help us create unity at this time, especially in our country that is so divided? And second to that, how can poetry make a difference? And I know on the panel we've got poets and we have non-poets, so it would be interesting to hear the perspective of both.
Anybody want to take this?
Oh, yes. Well, what was the question again? Can you repeat the question?
Yes, I can read it again. Essentially, how can poetry help us create unity at this time of division? Or how, in general, can poetry make a difference in our lives?
It goes right to the heart, and it bypasses the reading. You have to go back into the poetry. It says like cartoon. Cartoons can state a fact, and that's clear through the cartoon. But the cartoon serves as a replicant of the people that the thing portrays. Say like if you have a rabbit and is chasing a cat, they might see the rabbit chasing the cat, but that might indicate that the cat is afraid of the rabbit, you know. But if you're looking at it in another way, and that also may mean something totally different. So poetry can mean one thing if you read it in abstract. It could mean one thing, but it could unite people by shedding a light on what they thought was one thing, and evidently was another. It could also shine a light on enhancing and enlightening them on situations that when they read a poem, they wouldn't have got the information in any other way. They were reading a poem, sometimes they think it's a poem, but it really is a measure of enlightenment. But when they read it as a poem, they don't know they're getting getting educated to another realm. So sometimes the poem could act as a substitute for something they weren't aware of. They could read a poem and get enlightened and don't know they were enlightened until they read the poem. So therefore that, serves as another insight, I feel.
Thank you for that. And in truth, that's what we did this evening. Everybody here received an anthology against hate, looked through it and picked something that went straight to their heart and that exposed something, and then read it, and then also took that through their almost a dream state to then take us to their own narrative. So the poems took us to many people's journeys and lives and experiences of hate, experiences of being the recipient of hatred. So we were able to almost get a twofer, though that's so sad to say, because the poem captured the heart, and then the heart took us on personal journeys of so many of us here tonight. So I think that the questioner actually got to witness the answer to his or her question.
I'd like to also just add, you know, it almost as a devil's advocate and so forth, as to, you know, does poetry have to make a difference, right? And, you know, poetry is a medium of expression. So as a writer, as a poet and so forth, I'm writing first and foremost from the perspective of expression, self-expression. If a poem that I write or I've been blessed to receive, it makes a difference, then you know, that is beautiful. But I don't feel like that is my initial goal. I'm going to write this poem to make a difference, because what if I write this poem and it doesn't make a difference? Am I now inexistent? You know, in that sort of self-reflection. And then also too, as far as unity goes, or let me just say this. So as the reader of a poem, because we know poems about interpretation and so forth, right? What difference do you see in yourself after reading the poem? Mm-hmm. And that's where the difference becomes. So if you read a poem and you don't feel any different and so forth, then you may feel, well, poetry doesn't make a difference. Well, maybe that particular poem did not make a particular difference to that particular audience or that particular reader. And thus far, I would implore to search for more poems, you know, more poetry to make that difference. But yeah, I'd say that poetry is about that self-expression, and if it makes a difference, it's beautiful. But if it doesn't, I don't know if that's really truly my responsibility as a poet.
Yeah, thank you for that, Frederick-Douglass. Joy Harjo says, I walk in and out of several worlds each day. And in truth, we did that tonight. We were in many worlds, and each have so many. And so I appreciate your comments. Julia, we'll take one more, and then that's all. We'll close out the evening.
It looked like Marilyn may have had something she wanted to add to the last question. I'm not sure.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Yes, I was thinking of a great poem by Rainer Maria Rilke, The Bust of an Archaic Apollo, in which he describes standing, looking at this magnificent piece of art. And what it does is it looks back at him. And the poem ends, you must change your life. When you have that kind of experience with art, with poetry, you look at it, but you also feel that it is finding and seeing something in you. You have to become a better person. The art calls on you to be a better person, not only the person who creates the art, but also the person who takes it in, who receives it, is also invited to change, to be changed by that experience of art. And I just wanted to add that.
Marilyn, thank you for that. I think that was a poignant way to close the evening. It is the artist and the recipient of the art the back and forth. That's the call for change. And so this is a call for change. And we're so grateful for the art, the artistry, the leadership of everybody who came tonight, who read, and all those who came to receive and to listen and to take it in whatever way is meaningful to them. Thank you very much. With that, we'll call it an evening. This will be taped, and if anybody would like access to it for nonprofit use to share the words and the stories for this evening, we can work to make sure that you get that. I'd like to thank Real Artways, Riverwood Poets for sponsoring this. I'd certainly like to thank this extraordinary team of readers this evening for creating such a poignant circle of narrative and art. And I'd like to thank all those in the audience. Good night. Thank you.